I am Brad Scoggin, and I am the CEO and one of the co-founders at ArborXR. And today I have the privilege of interviewing one of our newest team members, Dan Kuykendall. And Dan has decades of experience in big data, and I like to say decades so that it's very clear that he is older than me. Uh, and also experience in cybersecurity. He's had a couple successful exits. And most recently, about 2 years ago, Dan started a company that was focused specifically on the pain point or the challenge of proving ROI in XR. And we started working closely with Dan and his team about a year ago and pretty quickly realized that there was a powerful Better Together story. And so just a few months ago, we actually acquired Dan's company and his team. And Dan now serves as the head of data analytics and AI at ArborXR. And he's got a lot of great insights that we'll share in just a minute. But just to give a little bit of context, at Arbor, we have been in VR for almost 10 years now, which is just like, wow, right? Like 10 years is a long time in VR. I don't know if anyone else is coming up on that anniversary, but it's been a while. And I think one of the cool things for us is that from the very beginning, what got us most excited about VR was the potential to change lives, the potential for people to learn faster, to train quicker. And I think what's happened over the last 10 years, and I could say pretty unequivocally today, is that that potential has turned into a reality. And we're seeing companies like Mars Wrigley save almost $20 million over a 6-month period of time. You've got Delta Airlines, who's dramatically reduced their training costs. They're training people faster. Nicholas Health, which is a children's hospital in Miami, I put 8,000 people through VR last year. Children recovered more quickly from surgery. Staff got trained quicker. And then Kellanova, formerly Kellogg's, was able to shut down an entire training facility by moving the training into VR. And for us, over the years, our kind of focus or the place that we've played in is removing friction and helping this technology scale more quickly to bring about the life change that got us excited in the very beginning. And so for us, that's played out primarily as an MDM in 3 areas. 1, managing devices. 2, managing the content. And 3, managing what happens inside the headset with the user. And today we're now evolving that and taking that a step further to help standardize and make the ability to track learner outcomes, improve ROI, more scalable. And so, Dan, maybe you could get us kicked off here with what was it for you? I mean, 2 years ago, it was fairly early. Like, what was it that got you interested in this very specific problem space?
So I had been really thinking about the things that were causing difficulty for XR to scale. And as I was going around and asking questions, I kept seeing that XR and XR data was kind of in its own little silo, or not being collected at all. I was actually really surprised at how little data was being collected on what was actually happening in the headset. And what little was kind of in its little silos. And from my experience in cybersecurity, we made the same mistake where we were initially having all of our data siloed. It was like security reports, and only security people would look at them. And it wasn't until we started like just filing bug reports in Jira where people actually would see the data, and we'd start pushing data up to Power BI where the executives would start having something that measurable that they cared about. So applying that here, I felt like this is really needed. This space needs to prove the return on investment value, and it just wasn't being done.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Dan. And what we've seen is the problem space falls into 2 primary buckets. Number 1, the ability to easily capture the meaningful data from the content, and then 2, seamlessly pushing that content where it needs to go so that companies can prove ROI. And Dan has talked to a lot of companies in the last couple of years and has got a lot of interesting, wild, funny stories about how people are doing this today. So Dan, let's start with how people are capturing data today.
Okay, so some of it has been hilarious. We've been like, as I've talked to people, we have this like amazing VR tech, and people are literally standing there and measuring with like a clipboard and notepad, like, how did you like it? And how did what was your experience? I'm like, this doesn't work together. And then some of them are really interesting. Like one of them, I was talking with this large Fortune 500, and they've got some amazing VR content, fantastic. But what they end up doing is actually, think about this, they have a trainer and he's got an iPad or tablet or whatever, and he's actually watching what the learner is doing in headset. And he's grading the person. So he's got the tablet, he's watching, he's writing on a piece of paper what the person did or didn't do, and tracking it that way. And so that means that learner can only, or that trainer can only have one learner at a time as they're watching that experience. That does not seem scalable, right? Looking at that, I'm like, we need to scale this out. We need to be collecting data so that the learner can go and run on their own, capture the data, understand what they did or didn't do. Maybe you have some scenarios where maybe you want one trainer to be able to have 5 or 10 learners at once. This model just seemed inefficient for me.
Yeah, a very advanced technology that we're seeing deployed often in very archaic ways.
Yeah, we had a school, and in this one, at least they had multiple learners going on at the same time, right? So you can imagine a teacher, and the teacher was actually, as the students would come out, because there's no tracking, they would ask the student, how did you do? What was your score at the end? And then trying to write it down so that they can then manually put it in their LMS, their learning management system. And that's how they were trying to capture data, but they're running around. And so like, that's total honor system, right? Like students like, oh yeah, I got an A, right? But that's how they're tracking the information. And again, this is very interesting model that way.
Yeah, I have 5 kids, and I'm pretty confident at least half of them would lie about if they passed or failed, if it was just dependent on the honor system. So now let's assume that the company's got the ability to capture the data in some way. Maybe it's archaic, maybe it's more advanced. Once they have captured that data, how are companies getting that data where it needs to go today?
So again, another Fortune 500, another big company. They actually did work with their content developer to build some tracking in there. And so the content developer actually like had to host the server that would receive the data, right? Expose some APIs. So the content would then send it to the server. And then they created some mechanism for the enterprise to like download a CSV file, right? Just basic data set. And so then the enterprise would actually have to manually every week go and download the file from the server and then take it and send it off to their folks that would then like push it up into Power BI or something to that effect. But they're manually every week having to do this. The content developer is having to like host this server that they, is not really their core business. I'm not going to say if it was, had all the SOC 2 compliance or any of these kind of things. Like it's just there and it's doing this one job. But like that was so common in some of the conversations, these little one-off solutions that people were building, and nothing standardized in that setup.
Yeah, so you have large companies, very large companies now that are dependent on a small ISV to operate outside of their core competency to once a week get the data where it needs to go.
Yeah, so there's this, there's another one. This was kind of interesting, this therapeutics company. So they have this really cool content to really help people with pain management and whatever. So they've got a really cool solution. And what they would do is they would profile the patient. And I don't know how exactly they did that, some web-based thing where they would ask them a bunch of questions and whatever. And they would end up building a profile for the patient. They're manually then putting that profile onto the headset. I think they're actually plugging in the headset and transferring a file to it, so they have the file for that headset. Then they take it and they ship it to the patient. Patient uses it for a couple weeks, and while they're doing their therapeutics, it's recording data onto a file on the headset. They finish, they ship the headset back, and then somebody's got to plug it in again, extract the file. And then I think they were actually putting on a USB drive that they were then mailing to their analytics team. And then their analytics team would then pull it into their data tools and start doing something. But each one of these steps was this manual process that took time. And again, it's a pretty sophisticated program, but they're doing a lot of manual steps to get it to work.
Yeah, and this story is just wild to me. And when we first made the jump into enterprise at Arbor, beginning of 2021, end of 2020, we interviewed several customers around MDM and found very similar. I mean, we were on a Zoom call with someone, and he had all these boxes behind him. He said, "Well, you know what are all these boxes?" He said, "Oh, this is how we update the headsets. My job is to package them up, update them, package them, ship them. They're getting shipped back and forth." And another company was doing the same thing with flash drives. So pretty wild that we're in 2025. We're this deep into VR, and you still got people using USPS to update devices and to push content. This last story is a bit more of a sophisticated deployment, has some unique challenges. One of the things that we have found with more sophisticated deployments is that even though they are more sophisticated, more advanced, they've been doing it longer and at scale, oftentimes the VR training still lives outside of the traditional training. And so that brings about its own whole host of challenges. Maybe Dan, you could share that.
Yeah, actually, well, so this one they were doing it initially outside. They were moving toward the corporate LMS. Okay, so in an enterprise, you're going to have the corporate HRIS information system with an LMS component, and in that model, you need to identify the learner. Okay, so that you can get the data in. So first problem is how to identify the learner. So they actually are going through the effort of having the learner log in to the corporate SSO solution in headset. That's a rough experience, right? Trying to remember your password, especially if you've got a complex password and trying to type it in a VR keyboard. That's a pretty rough experience, but that's what they're doing. And then from there, they push it into the LMS, but they had like some old version of some LMS. I think they were using an old version of Moodle or something just for the VR training. But that's all they can get working. And so that's what they had to do there. So that's step one. So they're like identification. The other piece of it is they have learners, and you can think about this. There's learners that aren't going to have a headset available to them or are uncomfortable in a headset. So they have web-based alternatives, right? So they have fallbacks to go web-based. And they were telling us, like, one of the users got really upset because they're like, "Oh, I can't use a VR headset for accessibility reasons." And there was a whole bunch of, they had to like opt out of the VR and then go log into a different system and get to the LMS and get, so it was like, they actually like recorded 16 steps to get out of VR and go to web-based. And like, that's a very frustrating experience that they like reported to the management and were very upset about, right? So that was one of these experiences where we're looking through and going like, this is weird that it's out of the normal process.
And you can tell this guy looks very frustrated. It's a great picture. Yeah, I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is that as powerful as VR training is, for so many use cases, really at its best, it still is augmenting the traditional training. So thinking about and making sure that your VR training can seamlessly integrate into the learning process that you have in place is really important. And so really kind of the crux of this is stories like this, and working close with Dan and his team over the last year is what led us to say, okay, we need to bring this in-house. We need to acquire this company. They've built this product out over a couple of years. And so what we are now able to offer together today is what we are now calling ArborXR Insights. So it's a product that's accessible through the Arbor platform. Today we are in early access, and so if you're interested in participating in that, you can come by our booth and talk to Dan. But there's two core solutions to this. So number one, we have an SDK that you can drop into any APK and quickly annotate, have the ability to annotate activities or actions and outcomes. And then what's equally as powerful is what we call the LMS bridge. And that allows you to seamlessly integrate with, I think it's over 500 existing LMSs, as well as a BI tool, Tableau, or if you aren't even that advanced, we have our own dashboard that you can utilize to visualize some of these outcomes. And our perspective is, if you go back to the very beginning, Arbor wants to play a role of removing friction to help this powerful technology scale. And from our vantage point, this is the next big challenge. And I think we have an opportunity to really standardize this and make the ability to track learner outcomes and really prove ROI scalable. And I think that applies to any size deployment, whether it's a small K-12, a university, or all the way up to 10 or 20,000 devices in the enterprise. We've all got to be able to really prove that this works. We know it works. We need to prove that it works. We need to show leadership that it works so we can get some more money and we can keep going, right? And so we'd love to visit with you more. Dan and I will hang around out back here once we're done. And then if you want to come by our booth, we're at booth 328. And if you have any interest in our early access, we'd love to visit with you about that. Thank you so much for coming today. I know it's the end of the day. We appreciate your time.
We have time for a few questions if you're open to that.
Sure.
Anyone
Sure.
has any question, please come to the mic so we can record them.
Hey, my name's Devin. How you guys doing? Nice to meet you. What's one of the biggest challenges you guys face in capturing analytics from all of these different types of pieces of hardware? I mean, there's got to be 50 different pieces of hardware on the floor. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So what's kind of convenient is there's generally a few solutions that folks use to build content, right? So Unity, Unreal, WebXR. Those are generally what folks are going to be doing to build VR content. And we have SDKs for all of these spaces. So we make it real easy to capture data from those. And then once the data is captured and sent to our platform, then we can actually bridge it to the learning management system, to Power BI or Tableau or whatever it needs to go. Because again, the focus is very much on getting the data from headset to where it needs to go. And by integrating in each of those development environments, it simplifies the process significantly.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hey, hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm Sriraj. I'm from ASU XR's graduate student. So my question is so you're talking about VR headsets that add few difficulties with the person who's using it. And also I read your description. It said people use VR headset and it's more silo and it's more of a personalized experience. So do you have idea of if there is a way if you have to go without headset or give more a shared experience to people, so as it to have a shared presence for them to feel while they are working in the virtual world or and in the virtual environment. So do you have any idea or thoughts about that?
I might have missed a part of that. Yeah. Okay. So at the end there, what was that? The core question.
Question is do you have any kind of idea of if you have to go without just a VR headset, but then in a way where people can still be immersed and work how they work in together in a shared experience or in a space in virtual environment?
Yeah. Okay. So how this would work for shared experiences? So look, our system is pretty flexible. We have wrappers for LMSs specifically, but our event tracking is pretty open. So it really depends on the content developer and what they think is important to record. So you may track. So it depends on the shared experience, obviously. If you've got a shared experience where they're interacting with stuff or they're handing objects off, you might want to track that, and you might want to actually, we were talking with somebody half an hour ago that they have a shared experience content, and so they have whiteboards and post-it notes and all these things, and I'm like, do you know how many people are actually using these different objects? And he had some tracking, but not a lot of detail, and so they might want to track that. They might want to see did we build a whole bunch of tools that nobody are using, right? Or these are the ones that are most popular, or these are the ones that we need to improve. So you can track whatever you want. So it all depends on the content. If you're doing grades on a shared experience, that actually would be interesting because I don't know whose score that would go to. So that would be a problem if they're on a group project, right? Because usually our workflow is that you go in through the LMS, get authenticated, and then the records go back into that student's records. But yeah, shared experiences are interesting.
One thing I should have said too is that the whole process of implementing SDK to integrating with LMS or your BI tool can happen literally as quick as 15, 30 minutes. So it's a pretty quick, easy, seamless process.
Question?
Hi there. First of all, thank you for the presentation. My name is Sydney Light. I represent PepsiCo. And one of my biggest questions I want to ask is that, of course, the team I'm working on, we're developing a lot of course, mixed reality projects. And one of the issues is dealing with our clients, as most of the time they sound interested, but yet they don't want to go that extra mile. Of course, we need, of course, the ROI, figure out the KPIs. My question to you is this: what is the best way of sort of dealing with that roadblock in terms of sort of sharing the correct or the most essential numbers needed that show off the best results, essentially, to sort of move along that sort of like that step in the project?
Like to be able to answer that return on investment question?
Yes.
Again, some of this is going to vary on the content, but right now what we've been seeing in a lot of cases is, at most, sometimes you'll know how many times your app was launched, maybe how many minutes it was used or hours it was used, but you're not really understanding how the user went through the experience. How far did they go, right? And as you're starting to track that, what we'll end up doing is finding patterns that really signal success or signal problems, right? So, for example, we've had some training content we've looked at and was like, okay, we can see that on these 4 training modules, they all take 5 to 8 minutes. People have, X number of failed attempts before they get to the right answer. We're starting to see a pattern there. But then all of a sudden, this other module over here, they're taking 15 minutes and having, 4 times as many failed attempts. That's going to signal there might be a problem with that content, and there's something that's not clear, right? And so you'll start to notice these patterns, but it's going to vary on the content. But if you don't start tracking, you're just never going to know what to measure, right? And that's really kind of something we try to push on.
I think it's also worth mentioning that I kind of just flew through this at the beginning, but when we look across all of our deployments, the one commonality of the most successful deployments is that they have a really good ISV in the mix. And there's a handful in the room that we work with, virtual speech and VR Patience is here. Maybe others, the lights are so bright, but the ISV is so key. And so what we have built, what Dan and his team have built, and what we're now offering is, okay, let's bring in an ISV who's an expert in manufacturing and knows how to run a successful POC, knows what the right outcome should be, and let's enable them to be able to seamlessly capture that content and push it. And so there's still that kind of 1-2 step that I think that the most successful deployments we have that element of the right ISV, and we can just come along and accelerate those efforts.
You still have 3 minutes for questions if you would like to come to the mic. I'm sorry, we have to record it for the audience that will be watching the recording.
Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Reed Kaufman from Ohio with VR Patience. All right, so I pressed a button on a menu. Congratulations, that's nice. I clicked on a thing. All those things are analytics that are trackable. I opened it, I played it. I'll level with you. They don't interest me all that much. They're important and they're great for analytics. But I think the XR platform, VR, augmented reality, provides us modalities of analytics that have yet to been untapped, right? Enormous quantities. So my question is, in working with all of the partners that you guys have talked to thus far and integrated with, what are the XR analytical points that prove out VR as a revolutionary platform in terms of education and ROI?
I mean, I'll just be like transparent about it. I don't think we as an industry fully know yet. I think we need to get enough data together, and we need to, one of the goals that I have is maybe a surprise for Brad, so he'll be like, oh, he's holding on to his seats.
Oh.
But like in 18 months from now, I want to have enough data that we've collected that we can actually put out like an annual report sharing our learnings, sharing by industry, like what makes a successful program, and kind of informing this whole space so that we can all get better, right? And do it based on like actual measurable empirical data and not just user surveys, right? We really want to have solid data that we can start to use and start sharing, and so that we can share it with you, and then you could share it with the execs and share it with senior management that is going to help them realize that this is a place that they want to invest. And part of that is having the data in the same place as everything else. So if the web-based training that's happening, videos, whatever, if we can have our data sitting side by side with the other modalities and showing better outcomes, so that a year later when they do the retraining, they're showing the ones that did it in VR have retained the information better, retain that learning, and can demonstrate it, and it's directly compared against the web-based, I think that's going to help us prove the value of VR.
One just quick thing, I know what time is. I think if you take like the Mars example, so they had a cohort, one factory didn't use VR training, one factory used VR training. The factory that used VR training over a 6-month period of time, from a training time perspective, from waste perspective, from retention perspective, they say we saved about $20 million. So that's great. And that right there is what most companies are using to get the green light to the next step. But there's no granularity. There's no why. Like how many people went through it? At what point? What within the content? What within the training actually contributed to that big picture cost savings? And so I think that's part of what we want to work through over the coming months.
Amazing discussion. Thank you so much. Let's give them another round of applause for this great conversation.